All right. I think we are live. So, I someone noted that they were sad we didn't have an episode this week, Chick, and I said, I know I'm a little bit behind, but we're here at 2 o'clock and or 2 Eastern, and I think it's 11 where you're at or something, and I mean, so we're good, right?
Yeah, we're here this week, guys. Don't worry.
Yeah, we're totally good. We're here. In fact, we couldn't miss this week. There's so much going on. There's so much that happened this week. Um, you know, it's just amazing. It's been an amazing and just strange and bizarre week. Some things, like the what did you think of the interview with the doctor? What were your initial impressions? Take just walking away from it. What do you think?
Well, I was so glad to hear his opinion. And not because, he's a doctor, an authority figure, and things like that, because I like in the past, in 2016, when it was really crazy, like the end of 2016, start of 2017, there was like a couple of people who had almost come forward, but they were scared to, like nurses and things like that. But I was so glad that this doctor came forward, said, "Yes, I'm a doctor. This is what I'm saying to you. I studied medicine. I know where the kidneys are. The kidneys have definitely moved." And then going as far as to go into the MRI machines where it does scan you like slice by slice by slice, so they know very precisely where the kidneys were. And to see that that's changed and his medical textbooks have changed, that he's definitely Mandela affected. It was just really, really good because I mean, even in the past, I had a nurse contact me, but who wanted to speak privately. Even that person didn't want to come forward. So I hope the more people that do come forward, the more there can be a broader conversation about it in the population, because that's really the piece that's been missing the whole time. Is there's probably Mandela affected people out there that have no idea they're affected because the conversation hasn't gotten loud enough yet. But I think if we have a couple of more incidences like this, people will have to stop for a minute and think and look at what's being said. Because what are they going to say? They're going to say, "Oh, well, the doctor just had no idea what he was talking about with the kidneys."
Right. And that was, at the end of the interview, and that's why I said what I said at the end of the interview is that, and I'm happy I didn't even ask the doctor to say anything. And I'm glad he said that, the things that he asked me not to talk about, the way he wanted me to conduct myself before the interview, that the space and the time that he wanted for him to make his decision, I acquiesced, and I didn't push him. I didn't prod him. I didn't like email him or, in any of the stuff that, any of those things every day. I did not bother him. And I'm so happy he said that I honored my word is good. I have a good, I honor my word. And I think it meant a lot. It meant a lot to me. And I hope other people in the future for this channel, and for the contributors, and for just everyone that has anything to do with this channel to know that we're honorable people. And if you contact me and you're a professional, please know I will respect whatever guidelines you give me, as long as I get some kind of indicator, and we can talk about that and we can negotiate that privately, that you are who you say you are, and I'll be willing to put the good name that we've worked on for over a year and that I've worked on as a channel for 2 years. I'm willing to put that on the line as long as I can prove to my satisfaction you are that authority person. And you're right, Chick. It wasn't about the fact that he was a doctor and he was an Ivy League doctor and all of those things. Because for us, it doesn't matter. What it matters is for the people that are either new and they're scared, or the people that are doubters, or the people that are looking to wreck us or to, somehow explain away everything and belittle us and make fun of us. And it's happened to us. It happened to us for right. I mean, it only recently has begun to let up where people are just not constantly mocking and mocking us and making fun of us and saying just awful things. We start getting more and more and more people like that are of high caliber in their particular fields, and they're willing to go on a limb like this. There is no stopping us. That's for sure. There's no doubt. And again, anyone out there, you're a professional, come to me. We can negotiate on your terms, and I will stay, I will respect it, and we can figure this out together. So anyway, that's that, you know. So
I hear you. That's that's a very good not starting point, because obviously we've been doing this for a while, but it's a very good addition to what we've already put kind of in the folder of things that are almost indisputable. Kind of like Ed McMahon when we had that commercial for insurance, and he said out of his own mouth that he was giving people big checks. Very difficult for people to argue with that. Then the doctor, very difficult unless they are a doctor to start telling the doctor, you know, where the different body parts are. I hope that we can build a good folder of things that are very, very difficult to argue with, because that's apparently what the doubters are looking for is, you know, hard evidence, hard proof, or things that are very difficult to dispute. I kind of doubt that. I think they just want to, you know, stay away from anything that makes them uncomfortable, makes them afraid. And no matter how much proof we get them, they're still going to say, oh, no, that's not happening, just because I can't deal with it.
yeah, absolutely. And I think we're getting more and more comfortable in that position of authority because we have this portfolio like you're talking about. We have testimony, we have CIA FOIA documents, we have just regular logic. We have, you know, all kinds of media relics and artifacts. And just this week, I added into. Let me tell people that we are live. Um, you know, and it's so much of it now is coming together, and so much of it is falling together really well. And in fact, there's a couple other different professions that I'm hoping. What I would really like is for if it's happening, a lawyer, that would be really great for someone who is maybe a constitutional expert or something like that. If there is something happening there, because if it's happening in the human body, if it's happening in the Bible, if it's, I mean, it should be happening then probably in all aspects of life. And I would love to get different kinds of people who are experts in their field, like, Dr. Lenny Time. He has agreed to come on the show, and we just need to, take because what is he, biochemistry? So we'll have a biochemist in here. So that will add to like the portfolio that we have of people who want the hard facts. So fine, we'll go that route too. Whatever you want. This thing is real, and there's no turning back. And the CIA FOIA document. I think what the real moment it's really landing home with people was the gateway process, because you suddenly realize it's nothing like reality is absolutely nothing like the way in which it's presented to us and the way in which people insist that it has to be. And that was really the beginning of this whole thing, I think.
I think that it was, yeah, I mean, as far as coming to conclusions about the Mandela effect and trying to really explain on a larger basis what's going on, I think that it does kind of, it fits with kind of how reality and perception and what's actually going on with us with our different levels and layers of consciousness. It does, at least for me, give a lot better explanation than anything really that has been coming in my direction so far. And I have like considered all kinds of different things. I've considered time travel. I've considered, CERN. I've considered some kind of reality hacking or overwriting or rewriting. But you see things flip flop. You see things appear in one end of history and disappear and appear in a history in a different world. Like it's very strange the way it's all kind of like this big malleable dream. And that's kind of the strange thing about it, is that it feels a lot kind of that we're somewhere between, the physical linear real world and kind of the more malleable kind of perhaps astral or etheric place. Like there's something really strange going on here with the Orion arm and where we find ourselves. And it's interesting that people who are from here don't see anything weird about it, but I suppose they wouldn't if they've always lived here or they've been here since they were so young that they don't remember the other place. But I think clicking out, I think the FOIA documents, I think it's the closest thing, at least for me, that come to for an answer.
Oh yeah, those FOIA documents, man, they've really helped us out quite a bit and really kind of opened this whole thing up. Also this week, what was really cool, and I put it in the link, but I have a Twitter link here, and here we go. I sent that out, and I also now have additional pictures of the Ford logo from a wrench, and the wrench has the old Ford logo, and then from the doc, he sent over a modern picture of, and you'll love this one as a geo person, is like the modern picture of Los Angeles. And behind Los Angeles, you have mountains. And he has a artifact, a relic that I'll be putting up where it has Los Angeles from basically the same view from, I don't know if it was the 80s or 70s or something like that. And it was like it looked like a hardback book, like a coffee table book. And it showed Los Angeles, and there were no mountains behind it.
Oh,
Yeah. Totally. It was quite the mind, it pretty much blew my mind. It was pretty powerful stuff, yeah. So, in terms of geo, it was a massive geo change right there. And then with the Ford logo, I have a couple other pictures too now, and I just sent out. I have it's actually in the description to the Twitter link. If you could just click on that, and you can see the old Ford logo before it had that curly Q kind of pig's tail thing going on. If you remember, and I remember that old reality. It's wonderful to see again, but it drives home how far from home we are. But before I drift off to that, do you mind if I read out a comment to everyone? Because um, going back to the CIA FOIA document, I got a comment here, and I wanted to read it and then my reaction to it. So the comment says, "Hey SMQ, I really like your opinion and perspective on this about the Notre Dame. It's about the Notre Dame fire and about how you were discussing predictive programming with the iPad Goat video." And he goes, "How are you missing what's right in front of your face? I've been listening to go over the CIA doc and discuss how this reality works." And it has in parents love listening to your take and perspective on the ME and reality, by the way, in parents. And they pretty much tell you in the doc that they manipulate reality by putting the reality they want into the mass population. I'm really thinking that what we're calling predictive programming is actually the term programming reality by putting an idea into the mass consciousness and waiting to bring it into reality. So I thought, and I replied to him, but I want to reply to everyone if I haven't been clear about this, but this is what I replied to him. I replied, "I actually said that ad nauseum when I was hammering home the CIA FOIA documents. I said over and over they could be using the patterning process to change reality itself. In fact, I was using the Flat Earth movement as an example of a group that could be employing those exact methods, even if it was by accident. Yes, I think you're correct. If reality is consciousness, then changing opinions and perceptions is literally changing reality. Yes, I've been saying this for 3 months. Either I'm not doing an effective job really making people understand, or," and I said, "they aren't grasping the magnitude of what we're talking about. Hopefully it's just this one person, but Chick, I have to ask you, and I have to ask everyone in the chat, am I coming across clear enough what I'm talking about? Like with patterning and the FOIA document, predictive programming is reality programming." And that was well said by this person who made the comment. That's why the battle for the mind literally is the real battlefield. You read documents like Mind War and things like this, and it's literally real. It's actually it's not, we're not just making this up. It's actually, it's real, and propaganda and the way you persuade opinions. And that was my point about the flat earthers, that they're literally changing the the molecular structure of reality itself just by being belligerent. Am I being clear, Chick? And people in the live chat, do you guys really am I being clear when I'm really trying to get that across?
I thought so, but I think that there's so many different elements to, the FOIA papers, that you would say that, and then you would talk about, the different things that are in the paper, such as the holographic principles and the torus and all the different things that are going on. And then you might say that again. I would have thought that people would get it, but maybe because there's just so much and so much to be said that it's hard to focus on just that point. But I'm pretty sure that we did address, because you've said several times that one of the parts of the FOIA document is that for someone that's in a clicked out state who's trying to change their reality, if they don't give it enough time, they risk becoming disjointed from reality altogether.
Yes.
And you've said that over and over. So yes, you've said it for sure.
And then that's why I also concentrate on the patterning. The patterning is that process that they're giving. And that's why I bring up things like what the Tavistock, people accuse the Tavistock Institute of doing, and what people accuse different, insert into this variable whoever's trying to take over the world, whether it's the Tavistock Institute, whoever it is, it's that slow boiling of the frog. What they're talking about is patterning. And this propaganda they're using isn't trying to persuade your opinion. They're trying to persuade matter that is in harmony with their particular will. That's magic. That's all that is, with a K. I mean, that is literally Crowleyan style, D's style, Enochian chaos, whatever you want to call it. The books of the Apocrypha, the lost books of the Bible, it's that kind of movement of reality. And so I'm glad to hear that. And I'm seeing a lot of people inside the chat are saying, yes, that's exactly. And I'm getting that across. And even for people like Ash0787, who are saying that they're a skeptic, one of the things I point to why this document is so great is if you have a history with the Mandela Effect, or you have a history in studying alternative religions, or history, or the occult, or anything like that, it's hand in glove. All they did was put it together into a format that it kind of puts everything into a perspective that is easily understandable within 29 pages. There wasn't like the I'm still looking at the document, other than the actual operational way in which that this is handled in terms of teams triangulating on points in history. Nothing in that document was new to me specifically. So, I still go back to that particular document. So, but hey, Vannessa VA, how about that video, huh?
Yes, for sure. And just before getting in there, I think that one of the things that is going on, because I don't think that clicking out is causing the Mandela effect. I think being involved in the Mandela effect is showing us all the clearer what's going on in these different scenarios of Earth. And when you think of the things that are properly being influenced, is all of this tension energy and all of this weird meme, magic stuff that's going on. And what I'm seeing is different types of energies like that, like fighting with each other, like running through different groups of people. And to me, I kind of see it like a maze where they want to keep these different people and these different, sides of arguments or whatever, always fighting with each other. So they're always running around the maze, and they never look upwards far enough to see that they're in a maze. Whereas I feel like the people who are Mandela affected have been forcibly kind of given an aerial view of everything, or a superpositioned view of everything. And they can see that it's not just a maze on a Earth, but what you have is different versions of the same thing playing out in different scenarios at different times. I don't think that they're influencing as big of things as we think with the click out process, because I think a lot of them don't even know about the multi-scenario situations, because when you click out, there's no time. So people in the 1980s, 1981, everything, when they're writing this document, are currently affecting things in the click out situation when they have no idea about the Mandela effect, and they're just trying to, like, politically and otherwise change things that are going on in the here and now.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a really great point. You're right. So what we would view as in 1982 or 1979, they literally are above us in a superposition, or if not above us, they are, outside of whatever, whatever this is, they're outside of it. This torus that we're in. They're certainly outside of it. They're outside of this band of frequency, this band of vibration. And you're right. You're absolutely right. Their objectives, for back then, even though they're looking over here at us, their objectives could be completely different than what we're thinking they may have right now. No, you're absolutely right. And it kind of puts a strange twist on everything in terms of, I've always thought the delivery of technology was never actually the way it was presented. I always felt as if technology, it probably reached a stalemate maybe millions of years ago. And what they do is they present it in a way that it seems new, but it's not really new. It's kind of a repackaging of ancient technologies, and I've always felt that way. And if you're in a click out situation, that's exactly what that is. All of those things that have been or will be invented, that's done. That's already the case. So it's a matter, if you click back into a place that is under sort of the tyranny of time, as it's a linear progression of time, then what you can do is you can roll out this technology, and by doing that, what you're actually doing is you're sort of making those that are in that particular time period either both distracted or amazed, or you pacify them in terror with, like, maybe nuclear weaponry. All those kinds of things that you can do with technology. And again, that's why I've always been suspect of technology, and I've always kind of, I don't know, it serves me, but then again, I do accept that I'm a creature of this time. I don't I don't have the power. I don't have the courage. I don't have the strength to deny myself this technology and just suddenly get everyone's, physical mail address, and I'll start writing, to you guys on paper, on parchment that I create. I don't have that kind of power, that kind of just personal strength. So I use the technology that's available to me. And, again, I don't know anything, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm no kind of cult leader or anything. And I think too, to everyone else's credit, I feel like we have an inclusive atmosphere that everybody takes part in this. So, that's the only thing I credit myself with. So yeah, I guess,
I hear you on that. I'm just I think most people who come here and talk with us get it. I mean, there might be some people who are new and listening in and they're not quite sure what we mean with the FOIA documents, but there's lots of videos, if you go and look in the past videos of this channel, that go into the FOIA documents. They go into what is clicking out and what's going on with the different aspects of malleable reality as we see it, and how we even went into that this solid or more solid reality that we're in right now is considered to be just light, basically just made of light. That's kind of what they're saying the Orion reality is that it's a light projection, and a holographic one at that, and that it doesn't actually, it's not quite what we thought it was, and therefore it is more malleable and it is more open to being changed or to be affected by the intensity of energies running through it. And it's not that energies don't affect what we would have traditionally considered to be solid matter, but it's just, if everything is more in a light vibration, it makes it more malleable to the observer. It brings it into the double slit experiment kind of area where, based on whether there's an observer or not, you can have a particle or a waveform, like a light wave. So it can be one and both at the same time. Whereas obviously with solid matter, with the idea of things being solid matter not based on light, it's not so malleable to an observer or to their intent or to anything like that. It's more, it's a denser mass, a denser reality. It's not quite so, we're literally talking about coming from a denser reality that didn't react so much to a reality that reacts very much. And I think that became very apparent with the 2016 stuff, because a lot of people came here in 2015. I didn't, I came later. I literally came at the time of the election in 2016 to the Orion reality with the white sun, everything like that. But we saw when people were very impassioned and had a lot of intensity with what side they were on and politically what they saw and everything, we saw weird and strange reality things, jumps, skips, abnormalities, things that couldn't be accounted for, all kinds of things just happening. And I think that ever since then, on a smaller scale, it's been happening. And I am watching to see if these things kind of continue with maybe every, not just election going forward, but every big change that comes forward where there's going to be opposing sides. Are we going to see reality glitches because of the intensity of how people are observing what they think they're seeing?
Yeah, that's absolutely, yeah. I think that could be absolutely a certainty, actually. And I think the part of the discrepancies of what we're going to see is, like you were talking about, things like memetic magic and things like this information warfare. But it doesn't even mean like what it used to mean to us now. Now that you can do the clicking out. And, it's literally the information that you receive will make you create a reality you didn't even intend to create just by it being served up to you. And in a lot of ways, human beings are like these processors. I used to think of them as batteries, which they could be if you still go on that Archon kind of situation. But we also are processors, and that the information that's being fed to us is what we actually reflect back out to the world around us. And it's oh so true, and it's so insane, the prisons that we are all we've captured ourselves in based on different kinds of demographics all over, whether they're financial or whether they're geographic or whatever it may be. But the division of those particular demographics is so powerful because you're being fed something that your community only understands and sees. So you reflect that back out, and it's a literal thing. And for people like Ash0787, who's like new, I went ahead and in this episode, I went ahead and put back the original CIA FOIA document so you can understand. And to like Vannessa and everybody that was talking about Max Spires, I sent out that within the first 5 minutes, I realized he was talking about clicking out. He had discovered in some way this gateway process, and he himself where he had Vannessa here is talking about Sarah Adams, Max Spire's old girlfriend, speaks many stories about clicking out. Yeah, so everyone is knowing, and apparently we're just getting to this party of this multidimensional reality that people are fighting all around us in this battle zone where they click out. And all these things that you would think like a meme would be just so innocuous, but it has so many other deeper levels to it that are so much more powerful and quite frankly dangerous. And it is absolutely as important as a tank. And we were only warming up to this whenever I was taking the Parsons concept, that he was taking a magazine or a comic book essentially with rocketry, a science that didn't even exist, and through his will and through his ability to enact his will in accordance to the reality around him, he was able to take from that place that is outside of this time space and pull that down. And he was able to transform that into rockets and rocketry and invent a new form of science. And you start thinking about memes, and you start thinking about other forms of propaganda and PR. and you start thinking even about the basic concepts we think about in terms of communities and everything. All of it is in our heads, all of it, every last bit of it. It's all in our heads. And then that incredible video from Vannessa with the speaker talking about how it's seated in our heads, and then Buster, I put that link. Oh man, I think I left that link out, but I'll leave that link with Buster. He found this video, this incredible video, and it's ultimately what I always thought about in terms of quantum immortality. It's called "Scientists Discover What Happens After Death. Soul Goes to Another Universe," and it's by Robert Lanza, MD, with Bob Berman, and it's called Biocentrism. And I'll send the link here. Actually, I think I did include it, but I'll include it to the chat here. Here's the link, and it is really, really amazing. And all of this seems to coalesce around that idea of the central core idea of the original gateway process document. So we're onto it. We got the pulse. We're here. We've got it. Completely got it.
I think it's like it can get to a point of when I think about, the concept of I guess the quantum situation with going to another universe, another universe, another universe. I wonder if there's a linear life that ends, and then you end up going to another universe and another one, and then it's all crazy because you're out of linear reality. Mm-hmm. Or if it's almost like the old saying that life is a dream. You start to wonder, where is the start of this, and what was the super linear part? I mean, almost to the point of, it gets confusing to think, when did this really start? Maybe for some people it's not as confusing. It's just for me, I remember seeing Mandela effects, not altogether crazy like now, but seeing an effect here and an effect there years and years and years ago. And I start to wonder, like, at what point were things truly lining up as I thought they were? Or have we been doing this much longer than any of us think we were?
Well, and we could also kind of redefine this idea that we have in our head, like we have so much about reincarnation. Ultimately, the idea of reincarnation is coming back to, address some sort of thing that you've done, and to pay that back, or to pay it forward, or something internal that you need to work on. Perhaps this idea is exactly that. As soon as you die, you go into that quantum immortality state. Boom, you popped right back into another version of reality. And yet somehow it's changed enough to where you have to address someone's issue. Whether it's an outward issue, a wrong that you've done to someone, or perhaps something that you need to overcome in terms of maybe anger or distrust, or something that happened to you in your childhood or even in your adulthood, or something with a close personal relationship with someone, something like that. I mean, the idea of the ideas that we have, just like when I talked about the ideas of death, that we die and somehow everything is going to be revealed, just like that, we could circle back around and re-look at, reincarnation, and see that the idea of quantum immortality could exactly be that. And you could wake up again, like in Jacob's Ladder, and you're on a train. You thought you had died, and you just kind of looked around and realized it was a dream. And there you are, like in Jacob's Ladder. He's just a postman. He has a mundane life, a relatively mundane life. He drives around the boroughs of New York City, and he's delivering mail. But yet he's in that absolute last millisecond of life, and he's on the table in Vietnam dying. And his quote unquote real life is slipping away from him, but his entire life he's living through. And perhaps, like at the end, whenever he's able to somehow bond with his son, and together they're able to accept that you need to let go. And for Jacob in the movie, the central thing he couldn't let go of, with his archangel Michael, who was his chiropractor, but it was his guardian angel. It was the Archangel Michael was trying to tell him and kept telling him, you have so much tension, you need to let go. You need to let go. And he says over and over again throughout the movie, hell is for people that can't let go. You've got to let go. And finally, at the end, his son who had passed before him, is walking up the stairs and he takes his son's hand, and that's the indication that he finally got it. He let go. And then finally it flashes back to the scene where he finally dies on the table, and they said he fought and fought and fought to stay alive, but really what he was doing was descending into the abyss. And that abyss is that thing of resistance. It's this resistance that we all have, and that's the one thing that Jacob simply could not overcome. He could not let go. He refused to do it, and that was his sin. My sin could be something different. Your sin could be something different. Everyone in the chat has their whatever it is that you cannot let go of, or whatever it may be. It's very powerful stuff. Oh, Vannessa said I was giving her chills. So I don't mean to make people feel bad. I'm just saying it's a great point, and why I always come back to that.
I hear, like, there's so many different aspects and elements to this that are even just having come here and listened to things that people like Orion Arm people kind of say and how they kind of do things, how it's so different. But there are some concepts that have been introduced to me that I had never heard, in the original, the OG timeline that I was from. And one of them was actually on the subject of reincarnation, to do with Capricorn. And they have this idea here, like, not obviously everybody, but people who are into this stuff. I've heard a couple of different people talk about this online, how they think that Capricorn is the point in which souls can enter and exit this kind of maze or reality or lesson or whatever it is that this Orion Arm place is. And that basically their idea about it was you had to be reincarnated basically until your stars aligned, until you were back in a Capricorn kind of area and you could leave again. Which I don't like that idea, because then it's not in your control. If that's some kind of lesson or something that you have to do before you go to heaven, or however this whole thing works, because this whole thing is really wild and we're just learning as we go. But if it's your sin, like whatever it is, you can't let go, or you're really stubborn, or you're really angry, or you had a really violent experience or accident or something, and you can't, for whatever reason you can't let go, that could be resolvable. But if it's a situation where you're literally not at the exit point, you can't go, then you are stuck, and you can't really, if you're going to be quantumly immortal in a Mandela affected sense, you're not going to be reincarnated either, because you can't get out of your present situation, because you're just going to be in another Earth and another Earth and another Earth and another Earth. So it becomes very confusing then as to how one would even navigate such a system. And if there is some kind of grand spiritual lesson going on, a handbook or something would be really handy. Some kind of guideline or outline would be really, really good, because there's so many different facets to this. But I did think it was interesting because their rates of probability are way, the rates of randomness and probability are way lower here. And that was an experiment that the channel Mandela Effect was doing years ago. He had the situation where he was like shaking glitter. And you say, oh, shaking glitter, whatever, but people that understood the experiment were like, oh, okay, no two pieces of glitter of the same color were able to land beside each other. It was all perfect disorganization. And then he had several different methods with like cards and with other things, like I think game pieces. He was able to show through a series of experiments how the rates of randomness and probability are lower here. And that kind of tacks on to what I started talking about more recently with numbers and number language, and how numbers kind of directly dictate things here in the Orion Arm. So it becomes more predictable, because sure, there was such thing as like numerology and numbers and everything like that in the old, the OG timeline, but it was kind of very hit and miss. And some people, believed in it and some people didn't. And I didn't particularly, like, I knew what it was and everything, but it was just, I never bothered with it. And then I started to watch like the Orion people that are into that kind of stuff. And I said, I'll just watch for a while and see what the situation is, because the rates of randomness are lower here. So the probability that their ability to figure out patterns is much higher, and that the patterns won't deviate. So then you could actually figure out what's going to happen day to day. So I'm watching these different people on Twitter that are into this and are actually seem to be getting a handle on a system of numbering out how things are going to happen. And they were able to predict over and over and over again when there would be airplane troubles, airplane crashes. And I was like, okay, that's strange. So I watched them do it for an entire year and be correct. And I was like, okay, there has to be something. You don't usually guess everything right for a year and be correct. That when there's an 11 energy or 11 days, there's plane crashes and plane trouble. And then on different days that equate to different numbers, because, you know, different numbers are a different frequency, that different frequency reverberates throughout the light sphere Orion holographic reality and causes series of repetitive events to happen over and over and over again. And I was like, okay, this chessboard is a little bit predictable. It's running on numbers, and the numbers always mean the same things. And it's not a case of woo-woo or, you know, crazy spirituality, abstract thinking, or anything like that. It's literally the same patterns happen over and over again. And if you can just see what they're tied to and where they originate from, then you can pretty much not just guess what's going to happen in life, but manipulate what's going to happen in life, because the patterns don't really deviate here. All you need to do is figure them out, and then you can kind of stepstone around what's going on. And I think when you defeat kind of that level of the Orion arm, then you level up to whatever the next more complicated level of reality is. And my hope, obviously, is like the more that we understand this reality, the more that we can learn whatever lesson it is, whatever reason it is that we're here, and that we can go on from here. Now, whether that's to the new Earth, heaven, the 5-dimensional Earth, whatever it is that you think you're going to, I'm trying to see if there are real ways that we can make headway towards basically leaving Orion and going to the next places.
And when you know, getting back to your point to the small amount of randomness, even inside of computer processors now, they readily admit now that they have no way of having a true randomizer anymore. And I can remember whenever there was a randomizer inside of a processor, and it was very easy to build randomizers inside of a computer processor, and that's no longer the case. They can give you something that sort of looks like a randomizer, but it's not actually the case. And I actually do remember that experiment that you were talking about with randomization in terms of these sparkle colors, and it was actually on point. And another thing that, in a strange way, that's tying this all together inside the live chat is the idea of the 13th zodiac sign. Now, what makes it so interesting where I come from, and I would imagine maybe where you come from, there was 12, and suddenly there became 13 about 3 or 4 years ago. There were 13 sons of the zodiac now instead of 12. I remember that, and I remember I came close to being bumped out of Aries, and I was just days away. You know, I think I missed the cut to being something else. I don't know what's after Aries, but I almost became a Taurus or something. But anyway, the point is, for my birthday, I mean, the point is that I'm also reading right now about an old 2012 book, and they talk about these 13 tunes, and it talks about the Mayan way that they did the creation, that they monitored time, and they also thought about time differently than we did. But all of these things that seem to be randomized in these various systems, I'm starting to see harmony within those systems. And when you have harmony within those systems, it becomes less randomized in everything. Disparate things that are parted by different cultures and thousands of years they're apart, and they're starting to come together. And the reason why you have that kind of harmony is, well, not the reason why, I don't know the reason why, but the reason why you feel as if there's less randomness is because of that harmony that's starting to happen into broader systems that I'm seeing in terms now that I'm studying time in different calendars and alternative calendars from the Gregorian calendar. And I think I put that link up on Twitter. There's this great sort of indictment of the Gregorian calendar that I got from Buster, and I put it out there, and I think it's almost worthy of a commentary video from me or someone else if they would like to do it. But certainly I'm reading the book too that's talking about the way in which the calendar moves and the way in which the elements and the spirits move, and they're even starting to align with other systems like the the chakra systems, and you're just starting to see, and maybe it's because I'm becoming more educated in these matters, but I'm starting to see more and more harmony, not just in those kinds of systems, but in life itself. Everyone is they're tweeting out their synchronicities in terms of time. Everyone is seeing the double digit numbers of 111 or 1111 or 1212. There's all kinds of these synchronicities that everyone's talking about in their lives. And you're starting to look deeper into the messages that you're receiving. Oftentimes I'll think of something or I'll talk to someone about something, and then I'll hear or they'll talk about it on television hours later. Before, I wouldn't have been tuned into something like that. And now I'm hearing from people, particularly the Mandela Effect, the MEs, our community, we're starting to have a finer sense. You know, we're fine tuning all of our instruments, all of our antenna is becoming more fine tuned. And in a lot of ways, I almost think, in a small way, we may not be clicking out, but we certainly have a periscope that is kind of peeking out. Like if we're underwater, this density, the buoyancy of this vibrational frequency that we call space time. I believe all of us have some kind of extended antenna that is kind of outside of that frequency, and we're able to catch those synchronicities and those tunes and those patterns and all of those other things. And just the fact that there's a 13th zodiac sign tells me that was one of the first indicators I knew I was in Orion and that I wasn't in Sagittarius anymore. I have a feeling you're a bit more of a traveler than I was. I think I've had that one major shift, and then we've been shifting and recycling since we got here in Orion. I have a feeling you've come from 2 or 3 different places, and you yourself, part of your testimony is that as well. Am I correct in saying that, Jim?
I think that it's been a long old ride, and the more that I think about it, the more it makes me think, why did the 2016 and the 2008 shift affect me so much when I've seen changes in reality? I guess because I clearly knew I was in a different world completely in those 2 instances, whereas the other instances I saw the changes, but I was just kind of, eyes bulging trying to figure out what it was. But it explains so much. It explains why people have been acting so strange for a long time when I would bring up obvious changes. And now we understand that kind of culture of people that don't want to see it, or people that act weird when you point out a change in reality. But of course, way back when, there was no context for that. You were just one person on your own that could see, okay, this changed. I see that as different. And you try and show other people, and they act all strange, and there's no kind of context for what exactly is going on. Why are you on some different wavelength than they are? And I don't really have that answer, but I have said a lot of times, I'm sure people are tired of hearing it, that the first Mandela effect that I can remember was the mystery country off of the west coast of Australia disappearing in 1996. And I asked everybody, did they remember it? What was it called? Did they know what I'm talking about? And when I saw that show up again on maps here in the Orion Arm, it was an amazing blast from the past, because it was the same shape. It was that round shape. It was that size. And it clicked back immediately. Yes, I've seen this before. This has been happening for a long, long time for me. And now it's like the pieces are coming back into focus, and finally there's enough context to make sense of what might be, the biggest mystery of life for me, or the biggest mystery of my life, personally for me, not just for reality, but what has been going on this entire time. And I think there's other people that feel that way too. People that have seen changes a long time back and could never get any answers, that could never figure out why they can't fit with anybody else. Even when other people were a lot nicer than the Orion Arm people, or a lot more convincing, there were still certain subjects that people would never address and people would get all weird about. And it wasn't just the regular reaction like we kind of have, but there's some larger, grander stage going on here that we're all on, half unwittingly. And I think it's coming more and more into focus that there are people in this kind of game that want to play this game, that do not want to be disturbed. And that's why they get so mad when you try and show them that there's something not right going on here. And I think for us, we're probably just at that stage where we're ready to see what's really going on. And like you said, SMQ, we have that ability, we have that antenna, we have that potentiality to be awake, to at least be conscious in whatever this crazy situation is. I hope that I can gain, and that we can gain, a much wider viewpoint of what's going on here, because we can't really have clarity or control in our own lives when we don't really understand the game that we're in. We can see to a certain point, like I said, we can see people want to play this and don't want to be disturbed. We can see that we don't want to play this and that we've woken up, and we can see the glitchiness. We can see how cheaply this whole thing was put together in many instances. We can see how, you know, things don't line up historically. Things don't line up accurately in so many different instances, even as far as brand names. And often people are, the general population are willing to overlook that because they just don't want you to wake them up from whatever the situation is. And I don't think, I mean, at first I thought it would cheapen the idea of life to think that it was some kind of grandiose, either a spiritual lesson, or some people think it's more like the Matrix, that it's like a video game. But I think that it is deeper than that. I'm hoping that there's a good lesson for the soul, and that there's something that something really important and a good reason for being here. But I honestly think whatever that is, we Mandela affected people have already learned that, and we're ready now to wake up and see what's really going on.
Well, and I think being Mandela affected too, and seeing things like the gateway process and understanding the process of patterning, you also get a different context in history. Because I believe it was like, wasn't it Timothy Leary and all those kinds of from that era, those kinds of people, when they literally were trying to levitate the Pentagon, I think. And I remember thinking to myself, that was absolutely absurd. But now that you're reading from, and it was probably, I don't know if it was the 70s or the 60s or whatever, but obviously if a CIA FOIA document was created in 1983, then that means that technology was being developed well before that. That means they understood those kinds of concepts well before that, which would mean like the Timothy Leary era. So that means that they understood the idea of patterning, and they were willing to risk dislocation that you're being warned about in the document. So I think we're getting to that point where we're not necessarily, and I don't know if they ever succeeded in levitating the Pentagon or not. This version of reality, it never happened, but the more and more that we become aware of the multiverse, the more and more we think about these kooky ideas. And if you start to get a more broader understanding of the undercurrents, like you were talking about, there's this great game that seems to be happening all around us and we don't quite understand it. Well, by starting to put these things together, we're starting to understand what this great game is more and more, and it's becoming more and more obvious and more self-evident, particularly to this population. You can start to understand these things that sound on their face absurd. It sounded absurd that they were going to do whatever rituals they were going to do and make the Pentagon float as like a warning or something, or whatever it is they were doing at the time. But now you read the gateway document, you listen to different people, you take logic into your own hands, and you start to trust your own senses once again. You start to reject the ridicule. You follow FE and see what they were doing and how they're able to to basically harmonize will with reality. And you start to put all of those things together, and then you start to think to yourself, wow, it may not have worked, but at least you now have a better and broader historical context of what they were trying to accomplish. And they weren't just high and they were pulling this out of nowhere. Well, they were probably high, but they weren't just pulling this out of nowhere. There was context to what they were trying to do when they want to levitate something. And, I was reading this book called Basquiat from Phoebe Hoban. And now I like art and things like that because it's such a strange thing because, a lot of people don't understand art. And part of what the power of art is desire. It's the desire. It's the moment of capture and all of these other things. Art isn't really about actually the art itself. It's about the art of perception. And perhaps intuitively, I may have understood that before I was ever even Mandela affected. But in the book Basquiat, and this is a biography on the famous painter in New York City in the late 70s and early 80s. He had scorned a lover of his, and she performed a black magic ritual on him in front of his apartment. And this artist, or this author, states it quite, matter of factly, like, no big deal. This just what happened. She was very upset with him. But then you take those little bits, and then he dies tragically. And I think he's part of the 27 Club, even though he wasn't a musician, but he died very young, very, very young, incredibly talented person. I love his work. But, and then you start taking things like Leary, and then you start taking things like the Moon Museum and all these weird happenings. And why are they doing these things? And what does all that mean? And you start to, and then you get the Gateway document and you start to put it all together. And you start to understand, and you start listening to people like Eileen and other people like that, and they have things to offer. And it's like, there's more context to a lot of these things, than at least I gave it credit for. And now I'm giving it that kind of credit, definitely.
I hear you. I think that inside of the game, like when you fully believe that it's all real and it's all, it's so toweringly just solid and persistent in its state, then obviously that would be impossible. From that kind of mindset, you would say there's no way you could levitate the Pentagon. The Pentagon's real and it weighs so much, and it's. But if you're superpositioned, if you've clicked out and everything is made of light, nothing actually weighs anything, and what you're doing isn't real. And the people who are watching, are not even going to see because they don't want to see, because that's not part of their reality. It's weird how there's the kind of two different mind frames of it. If you, like I said, if you're in the middle of the great game, you're on the great chessboard, whatever it is, then these things are so daunting and so towering and so impossible, and you're so, you're so singular, you're so small and contained, and can feel really not victimized in the whole thing, but kind of more vulnerable to the different aspects and elements of this place. And whereas outside of it, if everything is basically made of the same thing, and you're not dealing with time, and you're not dealing with mass, and you're not dealing with these different elements that the way you are here, then it becomes an entirely different situation. I mean, if you even think about the difference of just thinking, well, what if you levitate a Pentagon that's made of light? What if it's just a hologram? And, I don't know how you go about levitating it, but I'm just saying, coming from a different aspect or different part of your consciousness with this, where you're not under the same constraints, it becomes an entirely different situation. And the people who are outside of the game, to them, it's an entirely different task than to the people who are inside of the game.
Absolutely. And just having these pieces actually elevates you actually inside the game, which is kind of frightening. And Vannessa had a great point. Basquiat indeed did make music. It was experimental, kind of blank generation, noise rock. It was proto-punk kind of things. You're absolutely right, Vannessa. And he did Vincent Gallo, who did Buffalo 66, and was it Blue Bunny? I thought it was Brown Bunny with the actor from Kids. Chloe Svagny, but I hope I pronounced her name correctly. But you're right. You're absolutely right. If you take away that, it's just not heavy bits of concrete, and we're dealing with light, and we're dealing with something that's very different. You even start to to view places like that should be these massive fortresses in a very different way, just at this level, even us not knowing like the game, but that there is actually a game happening, even that itself is a you look at all of it differently, and it starts to form something different in your mind, and your mind itself becomes less worried and less afraid, and it really plays into that. For me, I think the first step was the power of now, was my introduction to all of this, quite frankly, because I was able to quiet my mind and not play out every scenario. And once the fear left, that's whenever I was actually able to look around for once and pay attention. And I also understand, a lot of MEs are very spiritual people, apparently. We all have had NDEs, or we're sensitive, or we have powers in certain ways. And whether it's more exotic forms of worship, or more mainstream forms of worship, we all know that there's something way more than what's presented to us. And as I was explaining to Eileen, I used to be a raging atheist, and it just is not the case anymore. I used to rage in the streets for my materialism, and there was nothing else, and I was so happy about that, and that's just not the case anymore. And probably that was actually the first start of it, and it took years and years and years after that for for me to get to where I'm at now. So who knows? One thing I do know, as we're running out of time, there are 70 some people watching, and I only see 22 thumbs up. If we could pump those thumbs up, that will help get the word out a bit more, because I don't know if we're actually being shadow banned or anything like that, but I certainly know that getting more thumbs up it helps out quite a bit. Obviously, there's always super chats, and anytime you want to give would help, in terms of research and in terms of all kinds of things. Pretty soon here, I may have to get another burner phone. I don't know, but anyway, but yeah, the thumbs up are absolutely free. So you guys, if you could, up, they're already bumping up. Thanks, folks. I think we've got it for the hour this week. Chick, is there anything else you want to throw in?
I think that your last point is the most important thing there. Like, we come from so many different aspects, but a lot of us are very spiritual, and even people, who were atheist or materialist in the past. I feel like if you're Mandela affected, then you're past that. You're in a different understanding of things around you. And just the point you were making about fear, whatever it is that makes you release your fear, I think that's what you need to pursue. So, like, for you, it was the power of now. For me, it was, like, be careful when engaging with the game or the world or everything like that, because of, injury and like pain and things like that, which, I was very afraid of, because, like, experienced quite a bit of pain, like, in my life, and have not liked it very much. But with the quantum things and the amount of, like, healing and stuff that my body has done, and its ability to heal now, especially with the weird high-pitched frequencies and the Schumann resonance. Like, my teeth are rattling over here on the right side, but I definitely feel way better, and I feel way healthier. And I think that there's a lot of things going on, and I'm not sure how many people are experiencing this. Maybe that's for me, because that's where my fear was tied to, so that's helping me release all my fear. Is that I'm getting a lot of help on that side. Like, I feel like a lot of good things are happening with letting go of fear of all that. That it's always going to be okay. There's always going to be another Earth. If something happens, you just shift out. You never really need to be afraid of what's coming anymore. So I've kind of released all that fear through that element, through that aspect, through the shifting. It actually has, like, released me from my old fears of being trapped in the one world, and what if something bad happens. Like, that's gone now, because that's not even a reality for me now. And I feel like whatever your release from fear is, that's the most important thing to concentrate on and to allow that to happen. Because I feel like once you're free of your fear, you have so much more room for clarity and to focus on what is this game and to figure out what's going on.
That was amazing. That's well said. Yeah, it was like you were reading out of The Power of Now. That was I
Really?
think,
I've
yeah,
never read it. I don't
that's
know.
awesome. You know, like I said, it's this less, less randomness. Everything is harmonizing. That's why we're getting those synchronicities, and that's why people in this community, I think we're starting to like mind meld or something, and it's like eventually maybe we could do something again where we try to like change something or for the better, obviously, but or even do something really innocuous. Maybe perhaps we could do an experiment sometime. So, you know, something I didn't know as much whenever I tried the first Philadelphia experiment, but maybe we could do something, you know, now that we have a bit more knowledge, we have a bit more background, we could do something that is, yeah, we could start yeah, exactly. Consciousness patterning, like Buster was saying. Yeah, we're doing that. I think together, all of us are patterning. Really think so. I think we all are patterning. Absolutely. And I think that's part of a really positive community, which I think we have here. And I think, you know, if we're coming from, it's about intention. And if our intention and also our force of will is something that's positive, and you want to leave whatever it is you're focusing on in a better state than you found it, then oftentimes it goes back to that go with the flow. The flow is much easier, I think. Certainly the karmic ramifications are much easier. I didn't mean to go that long because I wanted to leave this with what Chick had said because it was so powerful and very profound. So I'm going to do that now. Any more thumbs up, if anyone can give, I would really appreciate it and would really help us out. And with that, everyone, that is this week's edition of The
The
Lost and
Lost and
Found
Found
Bin.
Bin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, The Lost and Found